This is On the Overrun, a podcast about cars and the people around them. Join us for a new episode. Welcome back to On the Overrun. Yes, I'm on my couch again in my flat with my Nazi colored earphones in. Because we're on another Zoom podcast, which is totally fine, and I'm so thankful for Zoom podcast because it means I don't have to fly up to Joburg or wherever in the country my guest is situated. But I hope you are excited for this conversation. Last week we had a chat with a very young racing driver at the start of his career, sitting in England, ready to represent South Africa there. And this week we're sitting and chatting with quite a legendary racing driver in the South African motorsport world, a name quite well known, not just because of himself, but his family as well, and someone I've been quite excited to meet for a while. You might have seen his cars, especially his green Porsche and the double-winged GTR that absolutely annihilated Simola Hillclimb not too long ago. But his name is Franco Scribante, surname you probably might have heard, as I've said, but I'm super excited for the chat. And yeah, Franco, thanks a lot for joining me. I really appreciate your time. And I'm sure it's going to be a good chat. But just to start us off, maybe give us an intro for those who haven't heard the name. But maybe give us an intro into you and what you've been doing the past few years. You're obviously a racing driver, but there's other parts of your life as well. And then your family, obviously, the family name plays a big part. So I'd appreciate if you can give us a bit of an intro into you.
Yeah, Martin, thank you for inviting me to talk to you and to whoever's listening. My family's of Italian descent. The sort of family company that we work in is mostly mining and construction today. Been around about 85 years, going more towards 90 years now, so been around quite a while. And quite some, let's say, if we go back to when the motor racing started, it was probably in the late 60s, early 70s, late 60s, I'd say. When my grandfather had already passed by, and unfortunately he died in an accident, and his brother, who continued because they were partners in the construction and tunneling business, obviously started to make some sort of money after starting out with nothing in those days, and started buying racing cars, and eventually ended up having a Formula One team in South Africa, and had quite some success with drivers like Dave Charlton driving for him, winning the South African championships. Yes. So that's where it started, and then there was obviously a long gap in years when he sort of stopped, and myself and my cousins, we're going back 30 odd years now. Actually, probably more like 40 years. Wow. Started in karting, and with some success between me and my cousins, won quite a lot of championships. I then went on to 250 superkarts with some success. It was about 3 years. I won twice, I think. Then I went on to polos. But with work and everything, I sort of stopped and started as I went. Yeah. And then I got invited for a drive in a Ferrari it was called the LTEC series in those days, which is now the Extreme Supercar series. And I enjoyed it again after having been out for a couple of years, and got started there again. And I got invited to a few drives. I got involved in historics and did quite a bit of historics. I've bought and built a lot of classic cars along the way, racing cars and road cars. And, in the racing world where we are today, we race the Porsche, as you know. Yes. In the Extreme Supercar series. In 2 weeks' time is the Simola Hillclimb, which has become one of our favorites in the GTR. So we're busy furiously preparing. I've just actually come from my workshops right now, where the guys are going through the cars, and we'll be back at Swartkops for testing on Wednesday, and then the cars get loaded on the weekend, and we're off to Simola. And that's where we are in the racing world at the moment.
So at the moment, you're actually preparing for a race coming up, which is quite exciting to catch you just before Simola. But how many of Simola Hillclimb would this be for you? For you?
You mean how many times have I raced it?
Yes,
Oh, that's a good question.
it's probably been a
I
few
raced
years
it
now.
once and then gave it up once. And yeah, I think it's 10 years, because the first time I won it was in 2014. So this is I would say the 10th year, because there was a COVID year where they missed it. So
Yes.
I think the 10th time, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome to know. But to go back a bit before the racing and before where we are now, I wanna dive into a bit of your childhood. And obviously your family's been into racing and into cars for quite some time, so I can understand it runs in the blood to some extent. But is there a memory or an experience or something that you can remember from your childhood or your past that got you into cars or that got you into racing, like a fond memory of yours that you think back and you're like, yeah, I think that's about where it started for me. Obviously it's been in your family, but how did it start for you? Where did this passion come from?
Um, I was born in 1970. So in the 70s, Formula One, without the internet or without TV today, was almost bigger to people who followed it than it is today. It was really diehard. It was almost like more of a cult status than it is today.
Yeah.
Um, and when I was young, there was always go-karts hung up in the rafters of my uncle's roof that had been there for 20 years and never taken out. And I would nag and nag and nag for them to come out, until eventually, after many years of nagging, I must have been about 12 years old when they came out. And my two cousins, Aldo and Silver, who weren't even really interested in that, had happened to be there. And we all had a go, and we were all instantaneously hooked. And we we got going then. My cousin Silver became a touring car driver for Opel. Very good driver, very successful. But how do you what's your first memory, and how do you get going, and how do you do things? My father, my own father, although he was a Scribante from the Scribante family, he was never really, I mean, he followed Formula One like any Italian does,
Yes.
and for Ferrari, but he wasn't pro motor racing. He was more pro getting to work. And when he said to me when I was probably 15 or 16 years old, he said, "You'll see, you'll get over this thing.
Oh
Just stop
wow.
thinking about it, and it'll pass." Every boy wants to race cars.
Yes, for
They get
sure.
over it. You'll get over it. And here I am today.
Oh my word. Yeah, quite a few
Yeah,
years later, and it hasn't really gone, or you've not
many,
really
many
gotten over it.
cars. Yeah, I haven't gotten over it at
Yeah.
all.
Well, that's good to know. That means the same fire and passion I have probably won't die anytime soon. Um,
Yeah.
but when it comes to your younger days, I obviously like what I'm hearing is how you got into karting and how because it wasn't just you but also your cousins, it sort of helped fuel that fire. But when it came to closer to high school, closer to end of high school time, looking forward to your future, was it really all just I want to be a race car driver, I want to go into motorsport, um, or was there other ambitions you actually had? Because I know obviously work and motorsport for you isn't the same thing necessarily. There is other stuff that you do. Um, but was it like a fork in the road for you where you need to decide, am I fully committing to motorsport or going another way? Obviously, where you are today, you get to do both to some extent. But how did that look like earlier in your life?
Yeah, look. If we go back, you know, for me today, fortunately, I'm what you would call in olden day terms a gentleman driver with a lot of success, because I've fortunately I've done well enough in life to pursue my dreams.
Yes.
But had I not done well at work, I wouldn't have been able to. And there was a sort of a fork in the road, because I developed an early friendship in my life A lot of the guys will know who I'm talking about, but they probably won't know that far back, with Tony Martin. And, Tony had just won the Daytona 500 at Charles van der Merwe, and he was the bee's knees, and they were the talk of the world in South Africa, and they were the boys. And Tony used to always hone himself in karting. And we both came from Durban. And even at his heart, I used to consistently beat Tony. Tony, if you're listening to this, don't lie, because you know it's true. 9 out of 10 times.
He's being held to it now, yeah.
And then the one prize giving, my dad happened to be there, and Tony went to my dad and he said to my dad, if you put money into this youngster, he'll make it all the way to Formula One. He will. And my dad was not interested. He just said, flat, no, that's the end of the story. It's not what we do. But, that's not a heartbreaking thing. It is what it is. I mean, we came from my grandfather just before my dad, came from Italy. They had no money. It's easy to live in a movie dream, but it wasn't. These guys had no money, and we had started to come well in life, and everybody had to work to get to where they got to. So my life took a different direction, and I'm not disappointed. I love the job that I do. We've done very well in mining, and it's afforded me the opportunity in later years to acquire wonderful cars, wonderful historic racing cars, do well at my own level in South Africa. And that's about it. I don't have any regrets. I'm very happy.
Knowing what you know about motorsport and how it looks and what it entails to be a racing driver, would it have been something you would like to have done full time, or do you actually prefer the path you've taken over the past few years?
Sure, that's a very hard question. I mean, I follow Formula One religiously. We are referring to Formula One now, or are we referring to any form of motor racing?
Well, racing in general, but it sounded like the passion was Formula One,
of course,
the goal at the end of the trail.
Just before I was searching through Netflix now, and came on the later season of Drive to Survive.
Yes.
Everybody's watched that, and it's made Formula One so thing. When we were young, and we still are, we were family friends of the Schechters when Jody became a world champion.
Oh, wow.
And it was, for me, that was a greater period in motor racing. It's so clinical now, and so much infighting and analyzing, and it's almost like ridiculous, And there was a day of great sportsmen. They died and they lived, and they became world champions, and they carried on, or they said this is too much. It was just a totally different time. So certainly at that time, at that level of technology, I would have loved to be involved. It's so hyped up and so intense today. I don't know so much. But like I said, I got no disappointments. Even today, yes. I mean, I was fortunately enough a little while ago to purchase, you may know, you're young, I mean, you may not even know cars like this, like the great Z181 Piranha Capri, but that Bobby Althoff drove to great fame in South Africa. So I'm busy restoring that car. It's got an invite to Goodwood, which in 2025 we'll be there to go up the hill. So I'm involved in a lot of projects, and I'm living a great motor racing life, with a normal working life. And it's not like if I don't get the drive next year, had I been young, I'm out of a job. So I'm happy.
Yes. No, it sounds to be the ideal mix, especially because you actually quite like what you're doing on a normal day-to-day basis as well. Which, I mean, for some it might not be the case, where it would have been total the flip side. But interesting to hear. I always find it, especially thinking back to Andre's conversation we also um, had this kind of motorsport and then normal business working life sort of running parallel, and now even in the later years becoming, like you said, a gentleman driver, um, becoming to or coming to a point where you enjoy much more of that because you've now worked hard over the years and afforded yourself the privilege to do that, which is I find awesome. Um, I think for when it comes to people with a passion for cars or racing to some extent, um, luckily there are a few ways to keep that passion going. Um, for you, it's been being part of these projects of building, restoring, building these race cars, going on races. It's insane that you get invited to something like Goodwood. For others, it might be joining a club and going on weekend drives, uh, on Clarence Drive or wherever. So that's one thing I do find quite cool. Um, I wanted to ask, when it comes to cars outside of motorsport, um, do you enjoy something like just going on a weekend drive or going on a longer trip? Um, I don't know, a weekend away kind of drive, or normal road driving and enjoying a car in that way? Do you actually enjoy that, or is that sort of taken away by this love of motorsport and what you've experienced with motorsport? Do you just get the fizz there, or do you enjoy both parts of it?
No, I absolutely enjoy both parts of it. I'm a big classic car collector, and I've got a lot of old cars from the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. For example, you may know about the Cape 1000 tour that happens every year now.
Yes.
I religiously go there. It's my third year. I take 3 or 4 cars, old cars, for
Mm.
my sons, for my brother, for my friends. Um, yeah, new cars are not my thing. I do have them, but
Mm.
I find that they greatly just park in the garage. And I love my old cars. You know, my favorite car. I have a 300 SL Roadster
Oh
that I
wow.
use in all these events, and yeah, it's that's my true love.
Yes.
Is classic cars. Um, so it's two different things, but when you're a car guy, you're a car guy. So I
Mm.
can't say I love the one and I don't love the other. I love motor racing, and I love particularly old cars.
Yes. Okay. So that's sort of the niche as well. But
Yes.
thinking of that, have you been to Goodwood Revival, or is this like when you refer to Goodwood, are you going to the Revival or the normal Goodwood race or weekend?
I've been to the Goodwood Revival to watch 2 or 3 times. Um, my invite for next year, because I've got such an amazing car that I happen to come across that's so unique. It's got a standing invitation at the Festival of Speed.
Oh
So
wow, yes.
I will drive it up the hill. We'll come nowhere because it's a classic car. But yeah,
Okay.
so I've been to just about everything there is to be to. Well, I say that tongue in cheek, but I mean, I've been to the Salon Privé in England, and I go to the Concours d'Elegance in Italy, and
Yes.
I've done the. I would hardly call it a tribute because it was a flat out race when I was there, just for bragging rights, if you want to call that. We did the race in Sicily.
Oh
What was the
wow.
race? What's the old road race called?
Isn't it the Mila Emilia?
No, that's the Italian one. The Sicilian
Oh,
one is. Oh my word! I've lost my marbles here.
it's okay. You'll get it later. But you've been
Yeah.
there. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you've experienced quite a lot of these older rallies as well. Because I was thinking about the Mila Emilia specifically, and some of the older, like there's a lot of these heritage or classic uh, tours, obviously through Europe mostly, and obviously in and around Italy, um, because of the heritage, which I mean, it is a total dream to be able to attend or be part of. Um, could you tell us a bit about some of those experiences you've had going on tours throughout Europe, or experiencing like this race in Sicily, and like some of the greatest memories you have of actually doing that, especially when it comes to the like classic car scene?
Yeah. It's always been great. It's always been a lot of fun, and especially coming from my ancestry, it's always been great. There's a lot of South African, very, very passionate people. I've always done these trips with the Cavalieri brothers. Unfortunately, Giorgio was passed today. We all had F40s where we used to go flat out through the mountains in Italy. Like groups of we would get together with our 10 F40s. And some of the guys were GT3 drivers that had just come like second in Le Mans and third in Le Mans. And we would go for like 3 days. But when I say flat out, I literally mean flat out. I mean, some of the F40s would touch the guardrails now and again, have no paint on the sides. But I must really advocate the Cape 1000 because I've done that for 3 years now, the classic car, and the Cape, certainly the Western Cape, hasn't been harmed the way that the rest of South Africa has been. As in, there's no potholes, there's law and order, everything works down there, and you will do something that's really changed my sort of way of thinking for literally a 20th of the price. As if you had to go to Italy or Sicily or Spain or Portugal, one of those places, or the UK, and it's just as good. It's honestly just as good. So there are now things happening in South Africa for an absolute fraction of the price that you can do with the same enjoyment. And I'll be honest with you, and I'm in no way affiliated with these things. They don't pay me to say this. They're just as good.
That's amazing. Can you take us through a Cape 1000 trip you did recently? Like, I obviously haven't been on it. You see photos and stuff on Instagram, which is insane. But where do you actually drive? What do you experience? What forms part of a trip like this? I'm sure there's a few stories to be told about that.
Well, really, it's the getting together of car lovers and often racing drivers who have gotten older and are no longer racing and feel no need to prove a point because they've done it plenty of times in their lives. And it's just about the friendship and the camaraderie and the loving of cars. And I mean, it's a sort of a 5-day trip from Cape Town to Manus, through to George, up through the mountain passes past Montague. And it's really just, it's driving. It's not competitive.
Yeah.
And it's where you're going to stop for lunch and where you're going to, eat and tell your war stories at night of who you were and how great you thought you were.
Yes.
And that's about what it is. It's just a lovely time for car lovers to get together and enjoy themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. I think things like that also add so much more value to the cars as well. Because suddenly you now not just get to put it in your garage or go out on your own, but you get to experience and share it in quite an awesome way. It's something special that a lot of people obviously look forward to, like you, who form part of that. So I'm very keen to see.
Yeah.
I'm very keen to see more of that in South Africa. I know we have a bunch of like clubs, like the BMW Club of South Africa, or Mercedes or Ferrari, and they have their sort of private drives or so on. But I think there's a lot more to be experienced here, especially obviously you mentioning the price, which is much cheaper than you would buy overseas, and that is just South Africa for you. But also like our roads and our scenery, and what we have to offer in terms of that is actually insane. It's not like I've been in Europe or the UK to experience their driving roads and driving scene or go on a trip there. But I think from what I hear from people, it's comparable to overseas tours and trips and driving roads and scenes. So I'm quite keen to see even more of that occur in South Africa throughout the years coming. And I think obviously our people are also just as passionate about cars as what you would get anywhere else in the world. But when it comes to that, I'd like to speak about some of your um, the most you've obviously spoken about your 300 SL, but I'd like to hear about some of your most like precious cars you've had the experience of owning or driving throughout the years, cars that really stood out, and possibly even cars you'd really want to still experience in future. What are these that really stand out for you over the years?
Sure, that's a good question. I mean, my let me call it my ultimate car, my car that's worth the most, is my 300 SL. It's quite an interesting story. You know, when I was a small boy in East London, I used to spend my holidays in East London with my cousins. And there was a guy who owned a 300 SL at the corner of the road, and I would sit there on the pavement all day waiting for him to come past. Those days you didn't have phones
Oh
that you could
wow.
record and watch it. So you had
Yes.
to wait all day. This thing was of such beauty that I thought that I had to own one of those one day. It was like one
Yes.
of those pipe dreams it's a dream. You would always hope it comes true, but it probably never would, you know?
Um.
And sort of later on in life, as I bought cars, I've always had car dealers sort of chasing me to say, do you want this? Do you want that? And one guy in particular would always have, like, every 3 months, do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want? It was actually quite irritating. And then one day he said, do you want a 300 SL? And I couldn't believe that he actually said this. And I sort of said, yeah, like, what are you talking about? Um, he said, no, there's one in Joburg for sale. And I couldn't actually believe it because, I mean, through the years, I've been hunting for them in overseas and
Oh, that's super rare.
couldn't get them back, couldn't get the right ones. They're always a hell of a lot of money. And so you could never quite make up your mind how you're going to afford this or what or not. And I went to see this car. It just so happened that my dad was staying with me in Joburg on that weekend. So I went to see this car. It was what was the guy's name? He was a brain surgeon. He lived in Northcliffe in Johannesburg. Anyway, I can't remember what his name was. And we went to his garage, and this guy was in his 80s, and he had one or two very old Rolls Royces there. And then in the corner was this very sorrow-looking, sad 300 SL and half flat wheels that wouldn't start. It was really tired. I can tell you the story of how he acquired that car because he told me the story as well. And it transpired that for about 3 months, this car had been on the market in Joburg, and everybody was trying to sell it. You know, all the dealers trying to jump on the bandwagon of the other guy, and everybody was trying to load on the top and whatever. And this guy had been offered so much money, which I thought was too much. And I offered him less,
Yes.
about 20% less. And I left that day. And the next day he phoned me and he said, come and see me. And I went back with my dad. I think maybe my dad helped seal the trick because my dad was a lot older. Unfortunately, my dad's passed today. And they gelled. And he said to me, he had looked at me on social media and figured out that I wanted the car to keep and not to sell. So I wasn't going to make a fool out of him by buying the car for a certain amount, taking it across the road to a dealer and selling it for X amount more. And so he sold me the car for a lesser amount. Can you believe it?
Oh,
Than to a dealer because
insane.
I was going to keep and appreciate the car. And today, it took me about 3 years. I've totally rebuilt the car. It's in concourse condition. When I say concourse, I don't sit there and polish the car. When I
Yes.
drive it and drive it and drive it, I use it on the Cape 1000. It's got thousands of miles on it today. Actually, after the rebuild, it's looking a bit worn already. But
Hmm.
that's how I treat my cars. I don't sit there and shine them. We drive them. So, yeah, that was a wonderful story of that particular car.
So I find the SL story or stories like that in general quite fascinating because that's what adds a lot of sentimental value to the car. Um, if that car didn't necessarily have a story, it wouldn't have meant as much to you as it does,
Sure.
even though you wanted it for many, many years. I think something like that, just adds a lot of value. And I find it so awesome. Firstly, that you drive the car a lot. Secondly, that that guy who sold it to you actually wanted to sell it to someone who's gonna properly use it and not just flip it for a profit. Um,
Yeah,
which I think is for many people, many older people I've spoken to that are lovers of classic cars and owners of classic cars. Like all of them have predominantly the same feeling about it. Use these things, otherwise they're just gonna sit, rust, and break down, and looking
absolutely.
like that sad 300 SL you saw before you actually purchased it. But I'm
Yeah,
quite intrigued to hear about the F40 because, oh man, you hear stories upon stories of what it is like to drive a F40, but to own it must be something different. To use it in a way where you are flat out around the bend uh, with other friends with the same car. You hear about what it feels like when the turbo kicks in at 2.5 or 3,000 RPM in a car with no traction control, all manual. It's sort of you and your own and your skill. Um, what was it like, obviously getting and then owning that car over the years?
yeah. Look, that car was an unusual buy. I went to Italy with my dad to purchase let's call it an investment car. I wanted to buy a 275 GTB,
Oh wow.
and I took my dad because I had no money, and my dad did have money. My dad was quite a fiery character, and the 275 was. I've still got two cars in Italy that this guy Bonini looks after me for me in Modena. He's a Ferrari dealer, not a dealer. He looks after Ferraris. He's a
Hmm.
workshop, okay. A very very respected man, rebuilder. I mean, you can go at any time to his workshops. There's GTOs, there's 250 short wheelbases, there's Monte Carlos, there's anything there
Man, what a
it's
sight.
like it's a parking lot of those sort of cars. I mean, it's crazy. So we went there, and I wanted to buy this car, and it was a hell of a lot of money. And my dad was very against this. And at that time, there was 3 or 4 F40s in the shop and F40s were at all-time low in value at that time. And for my dad to get out of this situation that he was uncomfortable being in, he said, "Why don't we just buy one of those?" Which is not the kind of car that my dad would ever have wanted to buy. So I was over the moon. I mean, I hadn't even
Hmm.
approached that sort of thing because the answer would have been an absolute no. And then we bought the car and we used it to great effect to these rallies, races. But these cars were not mollycoddled in any way. I mean, we were flat out at all times. And yeah,
Unbelievable.
anything that you've ever heard about an F40, and I've driven everything under the sun. They absolutely undertalk it. They can't talk about it enough. There's nothing as fast, always insane, always makes as much noise. Uh, you can think you've driven anything exotic in your life, and then you drive an F40, it's something totally different.
Would you Can you compare it to something else, or would you say this is like a one of its kind type of driving experience? Especially, obviously, I know it's older, but can you
No,
compare it to anything else you've experienced before?
no, it's the holy grail.
Unbelievable. And it must have been so insane actually knowing people, having friends who actually own the same car. It's a F40.
Yes,
It
yeah.
is unbelievably rare, very expensive, few and far between. Can't imagine there are a lot in South Africa as well. Well, yeah, there's
I
definitely
think
not a lot
there
here.
may be one or maybe two in South Africa, but
Yeah.
no more than. But it never ever crossed my mind to bring that car back to South Africa because you can't drive a car like that properly in South Africa. The
Hmm.
police know otherwise. In Europe and Italy, you can go past police at 200 k's an hour, maybe more, and they're waving you on. I mean, that's their national pride.
Yes.
It's
I
very
find
different.
in you've obviously had some driving experiences in Italy, and I've only really heard of people, seen people on YouTube driving there. But is it really that way that when it comes to supercars or all the classic sports cars, that there is a in general appreciation for those cars, even in amongst the authorities? When they see something like that, they get excited, they cheer you on. Like, is the culture around cars really what it is made to be in Italy?
Absolutely, and especially if you're driving an Italian supercar. I don't know. I don't know if they would have patience with you if you were driving something else.
Yeah.
Um, I've never been anything else. I don't know. But I mean, I've been going at speeds where they pulled me over after chasing me for a long way, where normally you'd actually get handcuffed and
Oh wow.
thrown in the back of a van. And they've walked over, and all they want to do is look at the car and talk about it. And
Yeah.
say, they said to you, look, we shouldn't be saying this, but slow down, but like, don't if you don't want to.
Yeah. That's unbelievable. Um, I wanted to ask you about some of the racing cars you've had over the years. And obviously I know of the more modern ones like your Porsche and the GTR. Um, but what have been some of your favorite racing cars that you have the privilege to drive and own over the years?
Look, probably my most famous racing car is my B19 Chevron. I don't know if you know about that car. Um,
I've seen photos, but
yeah, that car was driven by very famous racing drivers. In that car's history, it was owned by Sterling Moss for a certain period of time as well.
wow.
And it won a few legs of the Springbok series in the 1970 71. I think it was 71. I think it won the 9 hour at Kyalami. Um, so it was all over the show. There were two Gunston Works cars built. Um, yeah, and it's of great historical value. It's a
Yes.
1970s car. I will be using it on the Friday in 2 weeks' time at Simola.
Oh,
That
great.
car's won the Friday 5 times at Simola. The first year I campaigned that car at Simola, we won on the Friday, and then we won the King of the Hill on the Sunday. It actually made them change the laws so that they never allowed uh, a car to compete on the Friday, because they never ever thought that a historic car could win, and it
Yes.
beat all the GTRs and everything. I mean, that's how a small 1970s car like that could go like that. I mean, it's unbelievable. It won everything. It cleaned up, and it prompted them to change the law so it can't happen again, which is quite nice for us because we go down in the history books as the only car ever to win a Friday and a Sunday. Yeah,
That's quite a nice trophy to have, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And beside those, any others? You probably obviously want to mention the Porsche and the GTR, the story
Oh,
around
the
that.
Porsche and the GTR, everybody knows about. Those are famous cars. They've done so well for themselves. And
Yeah.
then we built the B26 Chevron, which we won the one King of the Hill in, and we won two South African endurance championships in. Also a wonderful car. Um, there's been some other ones. I built that Mustang. I don't know if you were aware of the 65 fastback. I
No,
broke
I
both my
actually
legs
wasn't.
in. I hit my
I actually
wall. I hit
wasn't.
the wall in Swartkops and I broke my pelvis, my legs, my everything was just about finished. So
How long
that
was
car,
that ago?
that was
Or
in
how long
about
ago?
2015. So that's about 9 years ago now. And we're so busy building classic cars and racing cars to win the next thing. It's in the long lineup queue there of broken cars to be rebuilt. We will rebuild it one of these days and campaign it. Then, as I say, recently I purchased the Piranha that was driven with great success by Bobby Althoff in 1970. The car was so fast that they banned it
Oh
that
wow.
year. It was a once of in the world. That's why it's been given an invite to Goodwood. And I think once it goes there and hopefully does well, then it's got the badge there. That particular car will be worth a fortune now.
I can imagine.
just because of its rarity. Yeah.
I'm just interested. It is fascinating to me to hear how many projects you're currently involved in when it comes to you're just building the next car to win the next thing, to compete in the next race. You're spending a lot of time in and around cars and with racing. Um, Obviously, it would have changed over the years, but if you can give percentage wise, how much time are you spending on your motorsport versus um, your work, basically? Because I can imagine it sort of shifted all the more towards you being able to spend your time on cars and motorsport.
Look, I'm fortunate that my business is mining. Okay, so my premises are
Yeah.
here next door to Kyalami, and I have very big workshops because of the size of the mining machinery. So in the one corner upstairs of my workshops where my office is, I have my motor car division and my racing division, which is a big area but small in contrast to
Mm.
the other workshops. So I spend my day walking around there, looking, fixing mining machines and doing whatever. And I have my hobby, which is more than a hobby today, of the
Yes.
cars and the racing cars, right there on the premises, so I can go up there all the time. So it's two into one almost. It's not like I take time off to do the one or the one. So I'm really living the dream. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got my dream there next to where I work and I make money. So I don't take focus off the one or off the other. And I'm very fortunate. And I have a great team of guys led by Kobus Jonker, my head guy in charge, um, that are as passionate as I am. And
Yes.
they're busy there today working, getting ready for Simola. I mean, some of them worked through the night last night to get engines ready because we're running out of time.
Oh wow.
I've spent years finding these guys and let me not even say nurturing them because they're so passionate, it doesn't take any nurturing.
Yes.
They go beyond the extra mile. And we're a family and we just love it. So
Yeah.
I'm so fortunate to be able to work in an industry that I love, make money, and be able to finance the other thing that I love, which is right under the same roof.
I okay. I didn't realize it was under the same roof to that extent. I thought it was very much like a separate thing, but what a privilege indeed. Um, I think when it comes to coming to work in the morning, it must be quite nice to quickly check in the workshop and see um
That's exactly what it's
what's
like.
cooking there. Probably it's a good distraction to have when you're having
Yeah,
some
it's lovely.
frustrations at work. Um, yeah, I find that very cool. I wanted to ask about some of your recent successes in racing. Now, when I say recent, your successes go back quite a few years because you've been doing this for quite some time. But are there a few successes or achievements in your racing career that stand out, that you sort of think very fondly back towards? What are some of these greatest achievements in racing that you've experienced, and are there any that you're still aiming for, or that you're still sort of looking towards, being like, yes, that's where I want to head?
No, I wouldn't really say I have anything left in the horizon to say, that's where I want to head. I mean, my ultimate thrill in the last couple of years has really been the hill climbs. And maybe that is because, like with the Porsche or with the endurance series, there's 8 races in a year, so you're continually racing them with hopefully a lot of success and often
Yeah.
winning championships and sometimes just losing them. But let's just take the Simola Hill Climb for example. I mean, hill climbs have become very much the thing again, and it looks like there's 4 hill climbs guaranteed in South Africa this year. High-profile events from being only one being Simola in the last couple of years.
Oh
Now, the
wow.
Simola has morphed into being a world-class event where, I mean, last year, Peter Solberg, he was the world rally champion, was out.
Hmm.
And that it came down to the wire between myself, Richard Roots, and Peter Solberg, and I won, fortunately, very luckily, because there was
Mm.
nothing in it. So you can only say luckily, because whoever won it would have been luckily. And I really love those events because it goes down to the wire, to the last second. And for me, I missed a professional driving career, and I don't lose sleep over it.
Yes.
So it's just the next win, and how ultimate and how thrilling it is, and that's all that it really is to me.
It must have been quite a, or you must have given yourself quite a pat on the back for winning Peter Salzburg, or for beating Peter Salzburg.
Oh, it's always lovely to put that in your history book where you can tell your grandchildren one day,
Yes.
how can I beat that? How can I beat that?
Yeah. You see
Yeah.
this world champion, yeah, beat this guy. That must be
He
quite
was
nice.
nothing. Killed him.
Um, Also just something that I was thinking about. Now, you're a gentleman's driver. You've had much experience over the past few years. Um, but I do wonder, doing it so many years, um, do you feel physically that you're still able to take it for some time? Because I can imagine racing it takes a toll on the body. You just mentioned the hectic crash you had with the fastback and like breaking your pelvis and legs and everything. Like that must have been, even to today, it must have will have some impact physically. Um, but yeah, physically, do you think you can still take the racing? Is there something you can still do for some time on, or is there some impact from past years on the body that you're thinking, okay, wow, maybe I need to slow down a bit? I'm just wondering. It's interesting to me.
No, it's a thought that constantly goes through my head. I don't think it's past injuries. That's got nothing to do with it, really. I see, I have friendships with a lot of older drivers that were very good and in many ways very famous. The Schechters,
Mm,
Tony Martin, Charles van der Merwe. And I see the different drivers, how some remain very fast into very old years. I mean, if you put Charles van der Merwe in a car today, I think he's 70 plus.
yes.
He will beat 99% of young drivers at 70 years old. He's still got what it takes. And then I see other drivers, like even in their early 60s, that are very fast and they just drop off a cliff. Like one day they're there and one day they're not. It's like age caught up overnight and it's done. It's a done deal. So I will continue to race until that happens to me, whether
Mm,
it happens next year, in 5 years' time, or in 10 years' time. I don't mind not winning.
mm,
I want to be in with a shout to win. I want to compete. For me, the great thrill is to compete, and and with that shot at possibly winning. When that shot is gone because physically I'm just too slow. People say as long as you're having fun. I don't have fun unless I'm in a shout. I'm in with the shot. You know,
yes.
and I don't mind. To me, it's as much of a thrill to get beaten fair and square by a guy who's better, as long as I'm at the top of my game. So the minute
Mm,
that I feel that I'm not at the top of my game, I'll stop. And if that's in 6 months' time, I'll stop. And I've got no regrets. I've got a long run at it. I've got lots of classic cars. I've got some serious muscle cars to build that I never get to, like
mm,
1,000 horsepower car Mustangs and stuff like that. I've got all the kit to go with it. So I've actually got my older years pinned out,
yes.
exciting, with cars to build. And yeah, it'll be what it'll be when it will be what it'll be when the time comes. And I won't have any regrets. So.
I don't imagine it being in 6 months or a year time, because it seems like you're planning to go strong for quite a while. Um, but yeah, you also seem like the type of person who would absolutely hate to sit still or just looking at your cars. You'll need to in some way be hands on or a part of it, or
Yeah,
have a
that's
project or
why I
two lined
say,
up.
I've collected projects over the years. I've got quite
Yes.
a few cars that need rebuilding, and absolute from the core rebuilds. I've got Mustang shells with race chassis. I've got so many projects to keep me busy for so many years, hands on. to build some serious road and race
Mm.
cars. Yeah, and that'll be me in my later years. So I also hope it's not in 6 months' time, but it'll be when it'll be.
Yes. Hopefully not anytime soon.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the cars you're rebuilding and the projects you're lining up, are these all your own cars or cars within the family, or do you actually take on projects from outside as well?
Uh, it's all my own cars. Um, I've got two cars in Italy that need rebuilding as well, and I'll come back onto the queue that is already here. You know, I just find that for me or for my guys, we do things so well. I sold a 1948 Ford Bucky a couple of years ago to a South African guy for a hell of a lot of money. He pestered me in the end. I didn't want to sell this thing until the numbers became ridiculous. And he said to
Yes.
me, he'd been all over the States searching for a car like this. And even in America, he couldn't find one built to this quality. Unfortunately, every time I've tried to build things and we only build to that spec, it's the
Mm.
best or nothing. People don't want to spend that money. So
Mm.
they want the car, but they don't want to spend the money. And you end up arguing all the way until you say, you know what? You got your car, take it, leave it. I'm not doing this again.
Yeah.
Because the guys want the best for less money. And unfortunately, the two don't go together. So,
Yes.
you know, I would be prepared to do it if I met the right person who was prepared to spend the money to do things properly. But if it's going to be a bun fight all the way, while they don't want to spend the money for the top end thing that they want the end result to
Mm.
be, it's not. I don't need it in my life,
Yes. I
or the
think
aggravation. You know what I mean?
yeah, you obviously have enough. You'll have enough of that in your normal job or your normal workplace.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, but I think thinking of the story you told about the 300 SL as well, I think the ideal is, and the guy with the Ford Bucky, the ideal is probably to build these cars the way you want to build them, love them, drive them, and appreciate them. And then if there's the right person that comes along and says, I really want this. I love the spec and I love the quality. Here's the price you're asking for it. I think that's the ideal. And that may take some time and it probably won't be as frequent an occurrence, but that is probably the best alternative or the best way to
Yeah,
approach something like
I
that.
think my next project is a Mustang. It's a 65 road going Mustang where it's going to be built for myself to the ultimate spec. It'll have 1,000 horsepower plus.
Oh my
And
word.
if a guy comes to me and says, I want you to build me a car like this, I say, buy this one. That's the number. You
Yeah.
can take it or leave it. And if he takes it, I'll build myself another one.
Yes.
I'd rather do it like that than get stuck in a situation where I'm arguing all the way and he wants less for more, and I just can't do it like that.
Yeah. But just on the muscle car topic, is muscle cars it sounds like muscle cars are a big passion of yours. Is it specifically Mustangs or
No, I won't say muscle cars are a big passion of mine as such. I far prefer the sort of 1960s
okay.
Ferraris, Mercedes, that sort of thing. I wouldn't call them muscle cars. I suppose maybe of that era, they would be muscle cars.
Yeah,
Uh,
perhaps.
I have had an affinity to Mustangs because of a great success that I had with my race Mustang until I wrote it off, although it will be revived one day.
Mm,
Uh, yeah, I like to make old things go as fast as new day things can go.
yes. I think
Yeah.
but then a question on that would be what do you think about the current like Restomods are currently becoming a massive thing. Companies like Singer or Tatil or um I'm thinking of the one now in America, but I can't come to the name now. But there's a bunch of companies making restoring these older cars to look old, but essentially it's a new car in the underpinning, um, which
Well,
isn't
that's
somehow,
pretty.
yeah, some are pure, like sort of, the old car as pure as it can be, and some are, it looks like the old thing, but essentially it's like a GT3 RS, Um, what's your view on the current like resto mod scene? Is that something uh, you quite like, or not really your vibe?
No, I do, especially in the sort of American muscle cars, the sort of 60s, 70s. The Mustangs, I've got two in line to build, will be Restomods.
Okay.
Um, to build a 1965 Mustang back to normal, I don't see the point. There were thousands of them anyway, hundreds of thousands just about.
Mm,
And you can't take a 1950 priceless Ferrari and resto mod it. I mean, that's not going to work. You've got to appreciate that for what it is.
mm,
But there's a time and a place for resto mods, and I absolutely love it. And that was what my Bucky was like. It was a resto mod. Big
yeah.
racing
Okay.
vehicles in it.
Amazing.
So yeah, we love both. Yeah.
Okay.
And the builds that we are going to be doing going forward will pretty much all be resto mods. Yeah.
Pretty excited to see the creations you come up with then, because some of the cars you've built in the past has already been, I guess, a taste of what is to come, but pretty insane indeed. I usually
Yeah.
like to end off with this question. So, if there could be, if there's one road in the world and one car in the world that you would absolutely love to take on, maybe you've done it in the past and want to do it again, or maybe you haven't done it, but which road, which car, which country, like what's this ideal drive for you? What's the dream drive?
Look, it would be probably in Italy. I mean, there's a number of passes, I mean, that are wonderful. The name doesn't even come to mind. But my car of all cars is a 250 short wheelbase Ferrari. So it would definitely be that. Which road, I'm not too sure.
I think there's too many to choose from, a specific, mainly in
Yeah,
Italy.
yeah.
But that must, have you had the opportunity to drive a 250 short wheelbase or not yet?
No, I've never. Paolo Cavalieri, my good friend in Joburg, has got a. I wouldn't call it a replica because it's a Ferrari-based car with a short wheelbase body, and I drove that on the racetrack once, and I absolutely loved it.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but but a true short wheelbase, no, I've never driven one. It's my dream though. Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully someone's listening that'll offer you that chance. You probably have a few friends in Italy who could hook you up with one. So hopefully in the next few years we see you having that experience. But
So
Franco,
too.
I wanna thank you for your time. I really appreciated it. Love the stories, love your passion. Um, I think it'll be super exciting to see you take part in Goodwood. And obviously in the Hillclimb coming up, so good luck with the prep and everything into that. But keep doing what you're doing. It You're definitely not going to stop anytime soon, which is great to see. Um, but yeah, thanks a lot. And usually I just end it off by saying rather love cars because it's better than drugs.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Franco.
Thanks, Martin.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Okay.